I am really excited to have a chance to talk about aligning sales and marketing with Shannon Plum. Shannon is an experienced go-to-market executive who has helped multiple venture-backed startups scale and has recently launched Litwin and Plum Revenue Acceleration as a Service. Shannon, thanks so much for being here, and I'm really excited to get your take on how to align sales and marketing teams.
Thanks for having me, Anthony. I'm really excited to join in the conversation. It's a subject of much passion.
Me too, and most of the customers and clients that we work with as well. I think it's a big topic that creates a lot of challenges for teams, and I think you've seen it in so many different environments, and you've had an opportunity to help your clients navigate this problem as well. So really happy to get your take. Well, I think to kick it off, one thing that is always interesting for me is, where do you think the origin of this misalignment comes from? Why do you think it gets to the point where we can't get these teams in the same room or get them on the same page?
Yeah, I think it starts from what the focus is, even as the business is founded. So first of all, I see a lot of companies when they're in startup mode having a founder who's technical, which there's no problem with that. The problem comes in when the founder starts doing founder-led sales, which is amazing, but then oftentimes hires someone to do marketing. And I think if somebody that is the basis of the culture of the company that helps that foundation doesn't understand both sides of the coin, there's a misalignment from the beginning. And it just gets amplified as the pressure starts to build, as expectations for revenue start to come to the surface. And with that, I think the end result is that sales and marketing are on different sides of the table rather than sitting on the same side of the table, collaborating together and working towards the same goals.
I think that's a really interesting thought, because a lot of them do out of necessity. You have to start the business with some founder-led sales. Is there any reason you'd have a recommendation of saying, hey, start with hiring a salesperson if you're a founder, or start with hiring a marketing person if you're a founder? And do you think either one of those avenues produces an environment that sets you up better for the future?
That's a good question. I personally think that there should be also a thing such as founder-led marketing, which is a term that you don't hear. So you often hear founder-led sales, but nobody comes in saying, I do founder-led marketing. Have you ever heard that, Anthony?
No, I haven't. But I agree with you. I mean,
Why not?
it,
If there's founder-led sales, why shouldn't the founder try marketing as well?
I agree. Why do founders see themselves as not going into the marketing aspect as much? Is there a reason they want to spend more time on sales, or they don't really pull that on to own?
I think that there is a misconception that marketing is not as strategic as sales, and that marketing can be outsourced much more easily than sales can be outsourced. If you think about the number of marketing agencies that exist, the number of consultants in marketing, and the number of experts that are very tactical that just execute on marketing, I think it is a much easier thing in general to outsource, and considered, I think, in error to be much less impactful for the business, meaning that the founder doesn't have to have their hands on marketing. Whereas sales, the misconception is, and it I think that the misconception is that that is more important, when in reality, I believe the founder should actually be marketing, go-to-market specialists, founder-led go-to-market, rather than just founder-led sales. I would petition that we actually change it to founder-led go-to-market.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think there's so much, especially in the beginning, you have to be able to do a little bit of everything. I mean, I can speak from my own experience, founding Lean Scale, founder-led sales for sure, founder-led marketing. I never called it that either, but I think we did lean in there. And then founder-led customer success. Okay, you landed these new customers. Now, how do you make sure you can manage them and deliver? Yeah, and I do, and I think you're right. The founder often sets the tone of the culture, and then sets the tone of what the expectations out of these teams should be accomplishing, and I think can start to create that environment for whether these teams are on the same page or not. And I'm curious, you've worked with a number of founders and you've seen a number of different environments and I'm sure different types of cultures. What are some things founders can do, or you could even reframe it the reverse? What are some things founders should not do that could make it challenging for new marketing and sales leaders to be successful?
I think the basis of a lot of the tension between sales and marketing comes to how success is measured in each of the roles. And one of the biggest things that I've seen create that tension and play into hostility between the two teams, because let's be honest, you'll hear a lot of people in marketing talking about how sales is always complaining about not having enough leads, and a lot of people in sales talking about how marketing isn't delivering quality leads over the fence. And I think the reason for that misalignment comes down to how people are incentivized and what KPIs both teams are using to judge success. And I think a lot about leading and lagging indicators. So what KPIs should we be looking at? And I think that there are specific, obviously, that are diverse for marketing and sales. But my belief and where I've seen the most alignment is when both teams are measured ultimately by revenue, that lagging indicator of what comes in. While those leading indicators can be tweaked and those levers can be pulled, ultimately, I believe if a sales leader and a marketing leader are both measured by the revenue number, then that is when you're most successful in getting everybody marching in the same direction towards the same goals.
I think so too. I think aligned incentives are really important, and having the right definitions of what a win is, and if it's a closed won deal, then that's pretty simple. I on that topic, just because I think you'll have a lot of agreement when people hear that. I think what ends up being challenging sometimes, and I'm putting myself in the marketer's shoes, is sometimes a sales cycle might be lagging too long. Um, how do you think about setting up aligned goals if you have a business that has a longer sales cycle? Let's say it's somewhere potentially that 6 to 9 to 12 month range. Do you think about it differently in those scenarios, or do you feel like we should still keep them aligned on the same target?
I honestly don't think about them differently in those scenarios, but I think that the check-in points and the alignment throughout those sales cycles are important. I think a lot of times that sales leaders look at marketing as being responsible, but at the same time don't have that same payback to marketing. And what I mean by that is they hold marketing accountable for getting the initial leads. And there's a lot of communication during that front part of the process. So top of funnel, how are we getting the word out there? What are we doing to accelerate our inbound? What are we doing to do ABM, whatever that might mean? And then when you get to sales, it becomes a black hole. And the problem is that sales is not then coming back to marketing and saying, hey, you delivered me these leads. Here's what we're doing with them. Here's where they're in the process. Here's maybe even where we're stuck. I think there's a huge opportunity for marketing and sales to work together to even take stuck deals and push them further down the pipeline. And I've seen some really successful content plays, what could we give a value that marketing has their arms around where they can come into play even when things get into the pipeline. And again, this is going to bring in your enablement team, et cetera, and expands the team. But holding each other accountable and sales coming back to marketing and letting them know where things are in the pipeline, if they're closing or not. And if they're not closing, it's just important for marketing to understand those closed loss as it is to understand the closed ones.
Yeah, I think, something you said is actually resonating quite a bit with me. I think a lot of teams, and I've fallen in this trap too, think of marketing as, hey, thank you for bringing me the lead, pass it over. It's my job to get it done from here. And I think a lot of marketing teams see themselves as like, I did my part, now it's your job to go close it. And almost like seeing themselves as having totally discrete different parts of the game. If I were to use a sports analogy, it's like a lot of these teams are playing football. Marketing's offense and sales is defense. But I think the sport should be a little bit more nuanced where you're playing on both sides of the field. And maybe you're playing more of like soccer or basketball where yeah, you have your position, and you're expected to lean in and index on a certain position, but you're still playing both offense and defense the whole game. Um, and I do think sales teams don't lean on their marketing teams enough to say, hey, can you help me with this proposal? Can we spruce it up a little bit? Can you help me get a case study for this customer for an upsell? And not reeling their marketing teams into that, close to sale or post sale motion as much as they should.
Yeah, I think that's a really great analogy. And when you were talking, I just pictured the silos that exist. And that's, I think, a big reason why this go-to-market function has started to come up. And we're talking less about, the silos and more about someone unifying from a leadership perspective, which in the beginning in a startup is absolutely the founder's role. And as the organization grows, that's where you start to see the roles of like chief revenue officer come into play, where they're actually looking holistically, not only at the customer's journey from prospect to customer, but also how do you align those teams? How do you make sure that they all understand that yes, they're gonna be a striker in your soccer example. However, when there's an opportunity to play defense, they've got to jump in there and make sure that a goal isn't scored. So I think that's a great analogy, and unifying those teams will go a long way. It also takes a ton of effort because it's a lot more communication. It's being incredibly clear. And again, going back to that, whoever's leading those teams needs to keep beating the same drum over and over again, because I think we all have tunnel vision when we get into our role and we think about, okay, I'm going to only be successful if I personally do this, rather than what does it mean for the company. And I think that that's the lens a lot of teams are missing these days, is what is the impact that I have on the larger company and what's my purpose in this, and feeling disconnected from that leads to these silos, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think the theory of I'm gonna go to the CRO role that you brought up. I think the theory of the role is right. You have one person who's responsible for all go-to-market. They pull the levers as they need to with one unified goal of hitting a revenue or growth or usually some ARR target. I don't know about you, in my experience, the prototypical CRO is essentially a VP of sales who then gets authority over a marketing team. And I don't know if I personally have worked with people who can thread the needle really well between sales, marketing, customer success, sales engineering, implementation teams, and really understand that whole landscape. How, maybe a two-part question. One is, who are you looking for to fill that CRO position, or is that even the right title? And then how do you like to structure the teams underneath that role to give them the best shot at that hitting their targets?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I think something that the market's discussing right now and trying to figure out. What I've seen be successful is that CRO has reporting managers that, either frontline managers or, depending on the size of the organization, are, a couple managers deep, that are experts in their specialty. So they're marketing experts, they're sales experts, they're customer success experts. And that those people report directly to the CRO, and that the CRO is unifying the management team at that level, and that they are worrying about the day-to-day tactical and executing on the tactics that go in alignment with the unification across the team. I'm seeing a really interesting thing too in that CRO, and I don't disagree with you that historically it has been a VP of sales that gets promoted to a CRO, but I am seeing more customer success leaders being put into that role. And I'm seeing more marketing leaders stepping into that role. So I don't think it always has to be a sales leader. However, I do think usually it is. And I think the miss is just like the same thing we miss when we promote AEs to VP of sales, which is just because you do your role well as an AE does not make you a great leader. It does not make you able to see the strategical alignment across the teams. It does not allow you to coach other people. It just means that you are a really good individual contributor. And so I think what you're touching on is true. And I don't think it's that the role is wrong. I think that it's the scorecard for hiring the role, how you're thinking about who needs to be in that role that needs a reevaluation, and looking at what characteristics and qualities that person needs to have in order to fill that role. And a lot of times it's that they can't be so focused on the role that they came from that they can't see the forest through the trees. So a lot of people are like, a sales leader gets promoted to CRO and all they're thinking about is sales, which is a lot of times why marketing falls off and customer success falls off because their specialty is sales. So I would even challenge, like, does it need to be someone that has more of an operations background that fits into that role that can see across the whole team? And the other thing I see, Anthony, that happens so often is that people get promoted into that role for title only. They don't actually have the ability to affect the unification and the strategy across all the orgs. It is a pretty large organization that can have a full-time CRO. You've got to get to a certain ARR, some would argue, I don't know, 50 million ARR or bigger before it really even makes sense for you to have that role. Until that point, it really needs to be the founder or the CEO that's playing that role. And I think that's where the founder-led sales, the founder-led marketing comes in. That founder needs to have experience across these different verticals and understand why aligning them is important. They don't have to be specialists in them, but they have to at least be able to have worn that hat at some point in their career, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, so you mentioned maybe somebody from a customer success or marketing background, even potentially an ops background. I think maybe this is my biased opinion, but I think those departments are a little bit more nuanced. They don't always have a very clear, target. It's a little bit more broad role, so they have to get used to operating in the gray a little bit and balancing a few things. Take customer success as an example. There's absolutely a part that involves salesmanship and driving upsells, driving cross sells, but then you also have to do a little bit of customer marketing. And I do think people who have had that experience where maybe it's not as binary of what winning and losing is can maybe navigate an executive role as long as they've had the right amount of leadership and experience behind it. But I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think we'll probably see that trend more. And on the ops note, I have heard this as a rising one too. Is your head of RevOps the person best suited for a CRO position? In general, and I know this might go against, our industry a little bit, but in general, I don't think most ops people are ready to take on that type of role. And the reason is a lot of ops people have never been in seat in any of the execution roles on go-to-market. So they might come in, a common path up through ops is coming in to handle, some of the systems, and then they get a little bit more strategic. Now they're working data, and now they're laying out process. But they've never been a salesperson, or they've never been in charge of demand gen, or they've never been in charge of managing a book of customers. And I think coming in from a pure operational role, they might do a great job laying the foundation and setting it up for scale, but I don't know if they can execute well and bring really good execution ideas to the table for those teams.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I am seeing more ops people come from sales backgrounds, specifically moving over into ops. But I love the fact that we just uncovered it's so nuanced, right? There's so many things that play into it. It's not only the culture of the company, it's people's previous experience. What other roles have they held? How mature are they in their career? How many different, situations have they been able to navigate? What have they had exposure in? It almost, in my mind, if I think about if I was a founder, of having some kind of rotation of people through different departments so they could experience different things and at least get get exposure to what it means to be in marketing. What does it mean to execute a demand gen strategy? What does that look like? How do you create content? And you think about all the different roles in business, and how your best reps and your best individuals, your best employees are cross-trained across many of the different areas of the role, at least early on. I think the bigger you get, obviously, it becomes easier in some regards because you've got more people, but also harder because the bigger a company and organization gets, the more specialized individual roles become. They're wearing less hats. But I think that's an interesting take on things.
No, I think you nailed it. It's what's their diversity of background, and if you're going to bet on someone to be able to manage those type of teams, then is it somebody who's only been in marketing and rose the ranks to a VP of marketing role, or is it somebody who started in sales, spent some time in CS, did ops for a little bit, had exposure to marketing? Then they have a more diverse set of experience to come to the table with and really lead a diverse team like that.
Absolutely.
I want to shift gears just a little bit. I think I like asking this question just because when you've had a couple different types of experiences, we don't need like names or companies or anything, but what's the example of the worst alignment you have seen between sales and marketing in your career?
I think there's a couple of characteristics and some examples that I've seen. So the first is when there is one of the leaders in seat and they're not involved in the hiring and vetting process of the other seat, because they are such a true partnership that I think that that is a huge miss. And I've seen that cause massive misalignment. First of all, you're undermining kind of the importance of the person that's already there and their experience and their understanding of what needs to happen on the flip side. And then secondly, it's telling the candidate that you're hiring that this partnership is not important to the business. So that's the first thing, is that lack of involvement. The second thing that I've seen is when the executive leadership team causes friction by focusing on conflicting metrics that are important to each team. So diving deeper into that, when every executive meeting, the marketing team is being measured just on volume and the sales team is being measured just on revenue, it causes a lot of alignment and a lot of finger pointing because it's putting it in a public forum where you are literally asking them to spar with each other because the marketing is saying, I did what I was supposed to do. I got 500 impressions on that post, or I delivered 6,000 people to the webinar, and sales didn't do their job. Or sales is saying, yes, you did, except not one of those people scheduled a follow-up meeting with us. So that kind of public forum where you're encouraging them with the metrics that are not aligned is really, really, really decisive and can cause a lot of friction because it happens publicly and because it's like the microscope is on the things that are different rather than the things that are the same. So I've been in both of those situations, both incredibly uncomfortable. And some of the ways that I think you can obviously involve the other party in the hiring process. I came back to scorecard just because it's so important that everybody on the team is aligning with what's important in the other role that you're hiring. And then when you think about executive leadership meetings and KPIs and how you do that, I think that there is a time and place to have those conversations specifically about the uniqueness of the metrics that need to be measured, but probably not in an executive meeting. Do you need to get that detailed? That's when sales and marketing should be meeting weekly just together to align themselves and to build a relationship where they can hold each other accountable and have the disagreements that's not in such a public forum where they can kind of go back and forth in that tug and pull of needing to deliver volume and needing to have the outcome of that volume be aligned.
That's funny. It makes me think of an analogy at home. I have two daughters, 4 and 2, and oftentimes they're always coming to me to be referee. So, they're Stella and Sloan. Stella hit me, Sloan took this toy away from me, and Dad, you need to do something about it. And oftentimes I'll just say, you guys figure it out. Because you're gonna have to learn to manage a conflict when I'm not around anyway, and I can't come in and referee every little thing. And at a certain point, the team has to lead the team. So I think, I'm not saying they're children. Well, sometimes the go-to-market executives can act like children, but making sure that they can handle things between themselves, I think is really important. And creating the culture that gives them the autonomy to do that, where, hey, the CEO's opinion isn't the only one that matters. It's how does the sales leader think you're doing, or how does the marketing leader think you're doing? And their opinion should hold a similar weight.
Absolutely. I think that's really important. And that's where it comes to hiring people that you trust and giving them the freedom to execute their specialty and encouraging cross-role collaboration, and making that the expectation.
So from your experience, if you're a sales leader, what's the best way to get the marketing leader on your side?
I think there's a few things to consider. First of all, understanding their perspective. And there's a reason you have one mouth and two ears. So spending the time to listen to what's important to them, what goals they're trying to achieve. It's that I always say that sales is an art and a science. It's a science in the fact that you have to do certain things, and it's an art in the fact that you're kind of a therapist, you're a little bit of like a counselor, you're a coach. There's a lot of different roles that you play in sales, and I think the same is true in relationships, right? It's a lot of understanding what drives them, why it's important to them, what success looks like to them, and listening rather than speaking a lot. And then also the hope is that they reciprocate, that they also become curious, that curiosity about what drives you, what's important to you, and then finding some middle ground where what is important to them and what is important to you align, and you can figure that crossover. I also think that, like anything, we're humans, so building rapport, taking the time to getting to know them personally. I know that sounds just very elementary, but I think a lot of people skip that. And then we've talked a lot about in business about separating personal and business and keeping those separate. Obviously, you just shared your kid's name on a podcast, so you believe in like bringing the human centric things that make you unique forward. And I think what I've seen in a lot of teams is that when you can connect and they understand you as a person, they like you as a person, they at least respect you at the very least as a person, is incredibly important. And then it's just like a marriage. You got to take the time to dive into the issues that you're having and have the opportunity to share your point of view and have the other person respect you enough to listen and to break those down and to figure out a way forward.
Yeah, and I think oftentimes, and just like you said, it's like any relationship. And you can either get your relationship running on a flywheel of wins and mutual respect, or it could be a doom loop of finger pointing and blaming the other person. And I think sometimes you may find yourself in a position where you may be new and that doom loop has already started. So you get into a position, or the other person on the other side starts off as being combative and finger pointing towards you, and it's a very human reaction to want to start doing the same thing back. I think if you can be the person who, hey, regardless, I know you said we're not converting these leads well enough, or I know you've told us that we're not building you enough pipeline, and I might not even believe that's true, but you know what? I'm going to lean in and help you hit your goals anyway, regardless of how you've treated me so far. And I think if you lean in and take that step towards building that flywheel, I think it can go a long way. And if it doesn't, then maybe at least you tried, and you put your best foot forward, and because I think that's your only chance to get out of it. Because doing some more finger pointing or trying to paint the picture that they're not doing their job well, um, there's a guaranteed recipe for disaster if you keep that doom loop going.
Absolutely. You just defined the art of defensiveness, right? So the second that somebody gets defensive, it just feeds on itself if people play into it. So you almost have to break that loop. I
Yeah.
think kindness is a great way to do that. Just giving, I always think of the benefit of the doubt. I'm going to assume good intention. I'm going to assume that there's something going on that I don't understand. And I'm going to assume that they're not trying to attack me, that, they're getting a lot of pressure from the CEO. Something else is happening. And I'm going to do my best to lean in to help them be successful, which in turn will make me successful. And that comes back to tying success together. What's that definition of success? If a marketing team's definition of success looks completely different than a sales team definition of success, you're kind of feeding that doom loop, aren't you? Because they're already thinking they're on opposite side of the table. So how do you bring both leaders to the same side of the table?
Yeah, and make it okay for people to bring down their pride and not, if you lead from a position of fear too, then you sometimes can force people to get defensive and then start finger pointing because they think, hey, this is the only way I'm going to survive if the other person fails. Um, and if that situation is the case, then whoever's leading those teams already set it up to fail from the beginning.
Yep, it all comes back to the founder, the setting of the culture, right? As they grow an organization, they're the culture carrier. They're the one that really defines the tone. And so I really believe that it all starts there. No pressure, founders, right?
Yeah, no pressure at all. Everything's always your fault, and the credit goes to the rest of the team.
That's
So
exactly right. Well, that's a good leader, right?
that's the job. And speaking of, I think you know I am really excited about what you're venturing off and what you have set up today. I would love to hear how you have pulled together all the insights from your experience leading go-to-market teams, being in some of the fastest growing startups out there, um, and bringing that to the market. I'd love to hear what you're doing with Litwin and Plum and how maybe the way you work with your clients is helping to make this alignment between sales and marketing better.
Yeah, thank you for asking. So, yes, I'm super excited. Earlier this year, I founded Litwin and Plum with my partner, Corey Litwin. And just a short backstory, Anthony. So, we met much longer ago than you and I met. We've actually known each other for 15 years and worked at one of our first tech startups together. So, both of our background has been incredibly startup focused on leading individual contributor and then eventually leading go-to-market teams. And we had parallel paths, Corey and I. And so we kept talking with each other about how we were seeing so many common themes across every startup we worked with. We'd come in, there would be this misalignment between sales and marketing. Customer success wouldn't have incentives to upsell and cross-sell. They wouldn't have a scorecard for hiring. They wouldn't be thinking about how they're going to grow the team. The founder wouldn't actually be stepping in a lot of these roles and leading by example. They'd hire a CRO too early. We just saw these things happening over and over and over again. And over the last 15 years, we stayed in touch. We'd meet for coffee and we'd be drinking our coffee, be like, oh, I saw it again. I saw that happen again. Until we both went off and did our own thing. About 6 months ago, came back to each other and said, I've been doing this consulting thing and fractional. It's been amazing. And I said, I've been doing the same thing. And he said, would you want a partner? And it's my belief that, having a partner in the trenches with you makes it so much more real, but it also holds you accountable. It gives you someone to brainstorm with. You have a team rather than being a solopreneur. I know you've got some partners in Lean Scale, and I imagine that probably has helped propel your growth and success forward. Just having other people that are there with you on the daily grind. And so, yes, we formed Litwin and Plum. Our tagline is revenue acceleration as a service, obviously playing off software as a service. And what we do is we come in to help assess the go-to-market motions, identify what the priorities are, and then help the founders, CEOs, leaders of startups to scale ups in B2B organizations uncover where they've hit plateaus, where they need to tweak things, and how to move their business forward from a revenue standpoint. And as we talked today, revenue touches everything from marketing to sales to that sales engineering team, onboarding, customer success. It's really everything that touches the customer. And that is our focus as an organization.
That's really exciting, really exciting. And I think I'll echo the same thing. I've seen the same problems at a lot of the organizations that I've worked at. And now, Lean Scale has a pretty significant portfolio of customers. And going back to what you said, I absolutely would not have been able to do this without the partners that I brought on. The old saying, if you want to move fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go with people. So I think having the right team around you to keep you accountable, to push you, to bring new ideas and perspectives that you had never even thought of and would have never thought of is really important. And I think getting your expertise into these type of organizations so they can have a understanding of, you've seen it before. So this is oftentimes it's going to be their first time running into this challenge when you've seen it many times before. And it's going to be pretty easy for you to game plan how to get past those roadblocks.
Absolutely. I like to see, I've seen this movie, I've read this book a couple of times. It's amazing when you see it over and over again, you realize the similarities between businesses and really that the journey is the same. There's nuances to everyone's journey, but the same hiccups happen in every organization. One of those hiccups is that transition from founder-led to hiring a team. You notice I didn't even say founder-led sales because I'm going to challenge and put it out there. There should be founder-led marketing and founder-led customer success, right? So yeah, that's one of the things. And one of the things that Corey and I are really driven to do is make as much impact on as many businesses with what we've experienced in our careers, 40 plus years of seeing this over and over again. And so one of the things we're doing, Anthony, is writing a book on founder-led sales and how to seek those signs as to one, when you're ready to transition, but in the meantime, how to put yourself out of your comfort zone if you're a technical founder or if you don't understand marketing and really assume those roles. What's the point of that and what you should be doing in order to make that successful?
I love that because every single founder is going to find themselves in that position. So anybody who started a company or is thinking about starting a company, you're going to have to do sales. And you're also going to have to run the business while you do that and how you balance that. And then I think that transition point also super difficult to know when is the right time. Is it too early? Is it too late? Are you hindering scale or are you compromising quality? That's not an easy thing to navigate, and it's not an easy thing to really be able to identify and then carve out a path forward.
Absolutely. Yeah. In our research, most founders get it wrong at least once, with many getting it wrong as many as 3 times, either hiring the wrong people, hiring at the wrong stage for their organization, doing it too early, doing it too late. So there are a lot of nuances in there. And I think you hit the nail on the head. Everybody who starts a business has to go through this. So helping and figuring out, again, that art and science of what you look for that's, proven versus kind of what are the things that you need to think about that might be more unique to your business or, more part of your culture that you need to consider in this transition as well.
I love it. I love it. Well, for those listening and our audience or our customer base, when is a good time to reach out to Litwin and Plum, and what would be a couple signs that would say, hey, this team could come in and actually drive some serious change for you?
I would not be a salesperson if I didn't answer that question with any time. It's a great time to reach out to us. You can find us on LinkedIn. We also have a website, litwinplum.com. We'd love to hear from you, even just hearing experience from founders, people, we do some advising. So anything along those lines, love a DM. And as far as some things to look out for, I like to say what's waking you up at 3:30 in the morning. So if you're a founder or CEO and revenue is waking you up at 3:30 in the morning, give me a ring. That's a great time to reach out to us. Those are the things that you need to take care of ASAP because, first of all, you're not sleeping. But second of all, obviously, your subconscious mind is telling you that this is really important. When you've hit a growth plateau and you just don't know how to get to that next level, another thing we see common is leadership transitions. So I don't know if you know this, Anthony,
Mm.
but the average tenure of a leader in revenue is 14 months and continuing to shrink by the day. So that means every time an organization, especially in B2B SaaS, turns over a new leader, so much changes. It shakes the foundation of the team. So a lot of times we're called in to kind of steady that foundation and help prepare the team and the organization to find the next leader and make sure they don't get on this treadmill of replacing a leader every 14 months. And then finally, any leader that is thinking that they either need to hire their first AEs, and I would tell them always to hire not one, but two AEs when transitioning from founder-led sales to having a sales team, and or thinking that it's time to hire a VP of sales. Those are times that we're very useful and can step in and either lead the team on a fractional basis and or do project consulting.
That makes a lot of sense. And of those 14 months, I'm sure 3 on the front end are spent ramping, and then at least 3 on the back end are spent with people trying to figure out how to transition that person out. So the timeline of actual productivity is even much less. Well, Shannon, this has been super illuminating. Thank you so much. I think just hearing your perspective on how we can get these teams aligned, both from a tactics, let's get the metrics aligned, let's get structures aligned, but also from the person and people perspective of, hey, get out there and build genuine relationships and treat people like people and assume people have positive intent and do whatever it takes to get everybody on the same page. So that way you can give your company the best chance of getting to that next stage of growth.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. This was so much fun. I really enjoyed talking with you, Anthony.
Thank you, Shannon.